Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Glitch and welcome to Game & Lore. You may recognize me from a very recent Twitter post discussing some fake leaks I helped make, which featured Galactonite and the four heroes of yore. Once again, sorry. We're looking forward to Return to Dreamland Deluxe like everyone else, and wanted to do something fun for the fandom to enjoy as we patiently await the game's release. That's actually why I'm here with this video today. Return to Dreamland Deluxe looks to be a very enjoyable remake of the classic Wii game, though there's still a lot of mystery surrounding its biggest selling point, Magolor's Epilogue. Following the events of the main campaign, Magolor must traverse another dimension and regain his magical abilities over the course of the journey. This new game mode synopsis has sparked plenty of discussion online, with theories about what to expect from its story. This includes everything from Morpho Knight making his return once more in order to collect Magolor's soul, all the way to an unleashed Master Crown final boss following its destruction in the main story. This video is dedicated to my personal thoughts on what to expect from this new game mode before the game drops this Friday. Keep in mind that this video will contain spoilers for the original Return to Dreamland. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm pretty sure this is going to be how Magolor finds the Dream Kingdom of the Kirby Clash series, aside from his long-awaited redemption arc, of course. Let me explain. Gem apples are the key to everything! To go ahead and get started, we have to talk about parallel universes. According to an official report in the July 2017 issue of Nintendo Dream, it was revealed that our old buddy shopkeeper Magolor from the Clash games is quite literally the exact same Magolor that we encounter in Return to Dreamland. He just changed his clothes so he could appear more trustworthy and appeal to the Dream Kingdom's worldviews due to the fact that he was afraid that being dressed in blue and yellow would make them call him out for being a dubious lying egg. Thanks at BubbleKirby7 and at DarkerJenny on Twitter for bringing this to my attention. I wasn't aware of this. This would mean that in order for the two Magolor to be one and the same, while the events of the Clash games aren't explicitly canon to the main game events, they would still be canon in their own way, through the Kirby multiverse. Yeah, there's a Kirby multiverse. Essentially, what this means is that every single instance of a what-if scenario in mainline Kirby technically happens in an alternate timeline. Parallel Landia being corrupted by the Master Crown, that happened. Any of the Meta Nightmare and DDD Tour modes, those also happened. Every single Soul Boss, those also happened. In some other time, in some other place. This is actually backed by a Nintendo Dream article for Team Kirby Clash Deluxe that states that Taranza ripped holes in the universe when he was tampering with the Black Mirror, which resulted in the arrival of beings like Parallel Susie and Parallel Landia. After all, another dimension is essentially an interdimensional highway between worlds, as we see in Return to Dreamland, Forgotten Land, and Star Allies. It's possible that this could lead to more elements of the Clash games making appearances in the mainline title proper, especially since Magolor's Epilogue takes place in another dimension. If you've played any of the Clash games, you might recognize the essential material for gear upgrading called fragments. There are several kinds of fragments, yet the most elusive and valuable of these are the rare fragments, which are essential to reaching the fullest combat potential your Kirbys can have in these RPG-inspired platformers. Rare fragments are iconic for their silver crystalline look, with a star in the center of it. And as we've seen in Return to Dreamland Deluxe's sub-game footage, you can actually spot these exact items on the cover of some of Magolor's tomes in tome trackers. Based on all of the gameplay we've seen of the mode so far, these are the only spin-off game items to be referenced. It would make sense for Magolor to have books on rare fragments as someone who has accumulated quite the stash from the four heroes of the Dream Kingdom. Another thing I've noticed about the epilogue footage so far is the boss lineup. Despite this taking place in another dimension, we actually aren't seeing your typical parallel bosses like the ones from Star Allies, but rather a series of elemental doppelgangers. This is noteworthy because doppelganger bosses in Kirby typically originate either from another dimension or they originate from the Amazing Mirror, such as Shadow DDD and Dark Meta Knight. However, this time around, it seems to take a different route. Mr. Duder is now an electric wizard, Fatty Puffer has taken the Pyribbit route and lit itself on fire, and Goliath has undergone a killer transformation into a Gilman called Hydriath. With the exception of what appears to be a stand-in for Grand Doomer, the Doomer Swarm, all of these bosses have decked themselves out with lore-themed drip and tossed aside their core adaptations. Although it's not a common practice in the mainline games, bosses have undergone these types of changes quite frequently in the Clash titles, such as Electric Dragon and Mr. Floaty. Even Krako, a true boss monster, has undergone one of these transformations into a form of the totally toxic Venom Krako. Most notably, however, is that over half of Return to Dreamland's mini-bosses have undergone this process before: Ignite Edge, Frostkibble Blade, Flame Galbaros, and Spark Bonkers, with Ignite Edge even showing up outside of the Clash titles in Kirby Fighters 2. There has to be some significance to the tossing aside of previous parallel boss concepts in favor of these new elemental design philosophies. Oh, and one more thing. Based on the first area being called Aerogri Dimension, and every other boss, excluding the Doomer Swarm, utilizing one of each of the elements you can obtain in Star Allies, it's a pretty safe bet that this first dimensional area will feature a Bluster Woods boss, with Wispy being the only boss found on Popstar not shown off in any of the gameplay footage thus far for Magolor's Epilogue. That just leaves the Ice element, though unless they use it on Metal General as a clever Shiver Star reference, I can't say that we can expect an Epilogue boss of that typing. The architecture of Another Dimension appears to have Greco-Roman inspirations, as you can see by taking a gander at some of these pictures. We actually see this very specific type of architecture again in the Aeon Hero battlegrounds in Super Kirby Clash. You can even see the gold vine-like pattern sprawled across the pillars, which bear a striking design similarity to that of Aeon Hero's mask. Speaking of Aeon Hero, we're actually supposed to see him again eventually. According to the Super Kirby Clash news column, it was stated that HAL looks forward to seeing where Aeon Hero Dark may appear again in the future, and what better place to do that than in the new Return to Dreamland Deluxe. After all, Galactonite is easily the most bizarre addition to the original game. In every game with a true arena, there tends to be a harder form of the final boss exclusively available at the end of it. Except for Return to Dreamland. Magolor's Soul is actually the only example of this that can be battled in the established extra mode of the game. Merc Soul, Sectonia Soul, Stardream Soul OS, Void Soul, Astral Birth Void, and Chaos Elphalus all remain as solely final arena bosses. I'm hoping this remake will give some context on why exactly Galactonite is here to fill that role, since every other Kumazaki-era game would have Galactonite in the extra mode final boss slot, and Magolor's Soul as the true arena exclusive. Not only that, but in one shot of the trailers, we see Magolor looking around at some falling leaves as a star portal opens behind him, which he turns to. You might notice that there are pink shards floating around, a very iconic trait of Galactonite's eternal crystal prison. Also, fun side note, the fans in this footage have yellow-orange tips and bands. While you might think of Magolor's ears, he has white ear tips and yellow bands. However, this is actually a key trait of Highness's ears from Star Allies. Keep that in mind since Highness is one of the oldest living characters we have in modern Kirby. The ancient influence continues. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You've probably been asking yourself, how are gem apples the key to it all? Is this guy insane? Well, that's besides the point. Gem apples are a fundamental currency that can be found in the Dream Kingdom, where money literally grows on trees. Although one might first assume that Magolor having the gem apples as part of his playable movesets in Star Allies and Fighters 2 is merely a reference to the characters being in the Clash games, now that we've established that Magolor has actively been to the Dream Kingdom and is one and the same with Shopkeeper Magolor, there's a canonical explanation for why Magolor is one of the only characters to have gem apples. You heard me right. One of the only characters. There is another. Upon using the Cook Potluck on Susie and Star Allies, she'll drop an exclusive food item called Gem Apple Sherbet. This backs Magolor's comment from the 2017 Team Kirby Clash Deluxe website that states a pink-haired girl stole gem apples from him without paying him. It was Susie, who had managed to find her way to the Dream Kingdom. Somehow. Point is, Magolor's connection to gem apples is inscrutable, and it goes even further with the goal of the epilogue. Replacing the Lore Starcutter ship parts are slices of a large crystalline fruit, which you can see in several gameplay images, namely on the website. These are essential to Magolor obtaining new abilities, and clearly a crystal fruit must have some connection to gem apples. This is also backed by a translation of one of the tracks Hal showed on their Japanese Twitter account covering the jukebox feature of the game. Courtesy of Thanks Kirby Wiki on Twitter, it was revealed that the translated theme name is Malice Pumila of Judgment. Note that this may not appear in the localized English version, but fingers crossed. If that doesn't scream gem apples, I don't know what does. With all said and done, I believe that we'll see some big lore answers with the epilogue, namely Magolor discovering the Dream Kingdom, and Aeon hero Dark making his appearance in the main Kirby timeline. At the very least, they'll try justifying why Galactic Knight is in this game. Seriously, why is he here?